Today we tell the story of a missing teenage girl from Harlan County, Kentucky, a body, and a local cab driver convicted of murder on the testimony of the girl's friend, until the victim arrives to exonerate the killer. That, folks, is, yes, another one of the stories of Appalachia.
Okay, Steve, let me see if I get this right. Girl goes missing. Local cab driver,
Right.
accused of it, supposedly did it. And then she shows up. Well, after the girlfriend testifies or says, hey, he did it. Then the girl shows up.
You pretty much got the gist of the story.
Wow. And this happened in Harlan County?
Yes, it did. It did. Back about 100 years ago, yeah.
Wow.
So are you ready to hear the details?
Yes.
Condy Dabney was born in Coal Creek, Tennessee, now known as Rocky Top. And Condy was married with 2 children and lived in Coal Creek until he left the town in January 1925 to find work. He eventually ended up in nearby Harlan County, Kentucky, working in a coal mine near the town of Coxton, which is between Harlan and Everett. Now, Mr. Dabney worked hard in that mine, and when his shift was done, he'd go back to his room he'd rented to spend his off time alone, since the wife and kids had remained back in Coal Creek. He basically just worked and sent his paycheck home to his better half, and pretty much stayed to himself, which soon gained him a reputation as a silent man with a pleasant disposition. He was never known to be in any kind of trouble with either the authorities in Tennessee or Kentucky. But, Rod, that would soon change.
Yes, it would, Steve, because Roxanne Baker was a 16-year-old girl from Coxton that winter, not long after Dabney arrived in town to work in the mines. Roxanne, or Roxy as she was known, disappeared without a trace one day. There was talk in the community with some justification that Miss Baker had met with foul play, so a grand jury was convened to investigate her disappearance. Well, to make matters worse and even more mysterious, just before the first meeting of the grand jury, 3 local men also disappeared without a trace, just like Roxy Baker. The grand jury, though, had been impaneled to investigate Roxy's disappearance, not that of the other 3 men. Well, the jurors did their duty, found no evidence of anybody being involved criminally in the matter of Roxanne Baker, so no indictment was returned and the grand jury was dismissed. Well, in July, Condy Dabney decided that he'd had enough of mine work, so he quit and invested his earnings in an old Ford car, which he used to start up his own taxi service in Coxton. He did pretty well with his new business, picking up passengers and driving them to work and, to the store, back and forth, and then back home again. Well, frankly, it was a much better line of work health-wise compared to being bent over for 10 hours a day, underground, breathing coal dust, and worrying about a cave-in or explosion. Things were going pretty good for Condy.
Well, about a month later, there was news of more disappearances. 3 local women suddenly vanished, 2 of whom were married, never heard from again, and the third was a 14-year-old teenager named Mary Vickery. The grand jury was called into session once again to investigate, but this time there were 2 suspects. One was a man named William Middleton. The other was our Coxton cab driver, Condy Dabney. Both men had been reported as having taken Mary for a ride not long before she disappeared, but there wasn't enough evidence to do anything about either man, so both Middleton and Dabney were released from custody, the grand jury failing to indict. In September, Condy left Harlan County to return to Coal Creek, telling folks that one of his kids was sick and needed him, and so he was going to see about finding work a little closer to home. Meanwhile, a U.S. Marshal happened to be searching for a still said to be hidden in an abandoned mine shaft on Ivy Hill near Coxton. His search took him to that mine on October 21st, 1925, and there he found that still, well, it wasn't there. But, Rod, there was something else, wasn't there?
Yes, there was, Steve. As Marshal Adrian Metcalf went down in that abandoned mine, he soon found himself in a shaft known by local folks as The Booger Holler Shaft. Now, I said it's known as the Booger Hollow Shaft, but we'll, for the sake of things, Booger Holler Shaft. In there, he stumbled over a pile of rocks, causing him to notice some clothing on the ground. Growing suspicious, he left the mine to get some help from his fellow marshals. And when the men got there, they did a thorough search which turned up the body of a girl dressed in pink underwear, a hat, shoes, and stockings, and covered with a black winter coat that had been, well, let's put it this way, it's seen better days, okay? The body had been there a while and was decomposed, but most folks in Coxton, as well as the police, believed it to be the body of Mary Vickery. Well, gossip soon spread around the town, increasingly focused on that cab driver who suddenly left Harlan County a couple of months earlier. Soon the town demanded justice, and the authorities felt like they had no other choice but to act. An investigator visited Condy at his home in Coal Creek on 2 occasions to question him. Both times they did nothing. The investigator convinced Dabney was telling the truth, and when he said he had nothing to do with Mary Vickery's disappearance.
And Rod, that might have been that. But for Mr. Dabney deciding of all things to return to Harlan County to clear his good name. Soon after he got there, he was examined by the grand jury, and, well, let's just simply say they were not as impressed with him as the investigators had been. The grand jury indicted Dabney for the murder of Mary Vickery, and he was arrested on March 3rd, 1926. Meanwhile, E.C. Vickery, Mary's father, had become absolutely obsessed with the case, to the point that he conducted his own personal investigation of the body found in the mine. He went to the Booger Holler Shaft, where he discovered a ring that he said belonged to his daughter. That ring, Vickery said at Condy's trial, was the very one that he bought her on a trip to Knoxville for her birthday. Nobody else had seen the ring, and Dabney's defense attorney argued that it must have been planted by Mr. Vickery himself. The ring, though, wasn't the only thing E.C. Vickery testified that he'd found. He said there was a piece of stocking with a distinctive stitch like an L that he remembered seeing on Mary's stocking.
More damning for Dabney was the story told by an acquaintance of Mary's, a girl named Marie Jackson. Jackson testified that she and Mary had stopped the Dabney cab on the road just outside of Coxton looking for a ride. Marie asked Condy to drive her and Mary into town, which he did. She said they stopped at about 10 a.m. at Marlar's restaurant, where she got out. Mary stayed in the car, though, and Condy took off with her, coming back about 1 o'clock. Then the 3 of them went up to Ivy Hill. There they sat on a log together, and before long, Dabney told Marie to go away and give him and Mary some privacy. Well, Jackson testified that she saw him try to hug Mary, but Mary protested. According to Jackson, Condy Dabney then took a stick and hit Miss Vickery with it, then attacked her while she lay on the ground. He then came up to Marie Jackson and told her if she said anything about what she saw, he'd burn her at the stake. He then took Mary's body into the mine, and Marie ran off.
Now, there were other witnesses to the trial, both for and against Mr. Dabney. In the end, Condy Dabney decided it'd be a good idea to take the stand himself and tell his own story in his own words. He said that he didn't remember Mary Vickery, nor did he remember ever giving her a ride in his cab. He did remember Marie Jackson, though, telling the court that he often gave her rides, sometimes with men. He didn't know anything about taking her to Marlar's restaurant, nor had he ever been on Ivy Hill. In the end, Condy Dabney was convicted of the murder of Mary Vickery and sentenced to life in the Kentucky State Penitentiary in Frankfort. He appealed his case to the Kentucky Court of Appeals, and here's where things get a bit strange. You see, almost a year later, a Kentucky state policeman named George S. Davis just happened to notice a name on the register of a hotel in Williamsburg, Kentucky. Turned out that name seemed familiar to Patrolman Davis. What he saw, Rod, was the name Mary Vickery.
Well, when he thought about it, he realized just who Mary Vickery was. He also figured, well, being the cop that he was, he needed to investigate. It was during that investigation that he found out that Mary had, in fact, lived in the hotel just a few months before and that she had gone across the Cumberland River to visit friends. He went to those friends and there met none other than the deceased Harlan County murder victim herself, Mary Vickery, alive and well. He recognized her at once from all the pictures that had been shown in local Harlan County newspapers the year before. So you might be wondering how all this came to be. Well, Mary told Patrolman Davis that she left Coxton on August 23rd, 1925, with $5 in her purse because she couldn't get along with her stepmother. She had gone to the train station in a taxi, but didn't know who the driver was. The description she gave fit that of Condy Dabney, but making that ride is the only time that she had known that she had ever been with him. As far as Marie Jackson was concerned, Mary was absolutely sure she didn't know her.
From that train out of Coxton, Mary said she went first to Livingston, where she worked as a waitress. Then she moved to Berea, where she worked as a maid. From Berea, she moved on to Mount Vernon and finally to Cincinnati, where she found work in a woolen mill. She told Officer Davis that she heard about the case against Dabney back in Coxton while she was in Cincinnati and was on her way back home to clear things up. And when she arrived in Coxton on March 22, 1927, Condy Dabney was immediately released and pardoned by the governor of Kentucky, W.J. Fields, who then appointed a special investigator, G.J. Jarvis, to look into Marie Jackson's conduct and to recommend an appropriate punishment for her. The next day, Dabney again appeared in Harlan County to confront Marie Jackson and give his own testimony.
Investigator Jarvis concluded that Jackson testified against Mr. Dabney to get the $500 reward that had been offered. Marie Jackson was convicted of false swearing on March 27, 1927, the same day Mary Vickery, very much alive, was married to her sweetheart, C.E. Dempsey, in the Baptist Church of God in Coxton, Kentucky.
There you go, Rod. A case of a guy getting pardoned because his quote-unquote victim showed up and said, no, he didn't kill me.
Wow. That's just, that's what this is like an episode of the Twilight Zone. I mean, that's kind of what this reminds me of, something like that. And you're swearing up and down, I didn't do it, but yet all these people are coming out of the woodwork and so forth and so he did this, and he tried to make a pass at Mary and so forth. And gosh, this was wild. This was a wild story altogether, Steve.
Yeah, well, we did this. Well, we didn't do this story. I did this story way back in the beginning of the podcast, I think 2016, like 9 years ago, and realized we hadn't actually told this story to our YouTube audience. So we wanted to redo this and let folks know about this very strange case. Now, what gets me is if the guy had not gotten his head that I've got to go clear my name, he would never have been indicted. None of this would have ever happened. But he wanted to go up there and make sure that everybody knew he didn't do it, and I guess he just didn't make a good impression on that grand jury.
It makes you, you're kind of scratching your head wondering, why did he do this in the first place? And you can tell it's one of these things of, I want to be honest about it. I want to tell the truth about it. It's what I want to do. I don't want to be convicted, but not knowing, sure enough, you're going to get convicted for this whole thing. It's a sad story in one sense, and then it's a story of redemption later on, and it's just, wow. It's just an incredible story, Steve.
Here's the question, though. Who was that person they found up in that mine shaft?
Good question.
Yeah, indeed. That story, of course, the story of Condy Dabney, convicted of killing a woman who was, yes, very much alive. Another one of the stories of Appalachia. Thanks for watching. Now, if you like our stories, be sure to give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment, and subscribe so we can feed that pesky old YouTube algorithm. Till next we meet, y'all take care. So long, everybody.
So long.